The Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, has called on African militaries to strengthen their joint cyber defense, counter-terrorism, and intelligence sharing efforts in response to the continent's growing security challenges. At the opening of the inaugural African Chiefs of Defense Summit on Monday in Abuja, General Musa emphasized that Africa's security threats are becoming more sophisticated, with terrorism, transnational crime, and piracy on the rise, while cyber warfare and artificial intelligence are changing the face of the battlefield. He warned that no single country can face these threats alone, stressing the need for collaborative defense strategies. Musa advocated for operational frameworks that go beyond dialogue, including the establishment of an African defense industrial base. Musa has also highlighted Nigeria's leadership in peacekeeping, counter-terrorism, and humanitarian efforts, reiterating the country's commitment to strengthening regional security and building resilient armed forces. We now cross over to join Arise Security correspondent Ferdinand Duroha, who is covering the African Defense Chiefs Summit in Abuja. Hello, Ferdinand. How are you doing? Can you tell us what's happening so far at the summit and what the key takeaways are from General Musa's opening address?
Well, thank you so much. And, well, we are indeed having a nice time. And I say a nice time, and that's because it's one of a kind. Talking about the program, well, we've never seen anything like this before. A gathering of the chiefs of defense staff across Africa. Now, as at yesterday, well, the count was getting past 40, and we hear that some more persons will be joining today. And as we speak, well, just behind me is the plenary hall where they are having the plenary session. It's a closed one, and cameras are not allowed. And the reason is because we expect to have some frank talks. And so ongoing right now, well, there's a second plenary session, which is combating terrorism in Africa, the imperative of a strategic defense collaboration. And the main speaker is Ambassador Maman Nuhu, who is the Executive Secretary of the Lake Chad Basin Commission. And that tells us exactly what to expect. Well, we also have Professor Ibrahim Gambari, who is also going to be a moderator. And then for some of those who are on the panel, we have General Leo Irabo, the former Chief of Defense Staff, and also Professor Usman Tar. So it's an opportunity for the heads of security, heads of military across Africa to indeed speak. And that's because looking at yesterday, when you take a look at some of the things that were said, or perhaps I should go back to the beginning and say, why are we here? Well, we are here because it's time for Africa to indeed do something very, very strategic. But the statistics actually shows that 51% of terrorism deaths across the world globally was indeed, indeed took place in Africa. And what it tells us is that Africa has now become the epicenter of terrorism. To be very precise, well, sub-Saharan Africa has become the epicenter of terrorism. And so there is a need to do something. With the way it is, we know terrorism doesn't hide behind borders. And so no matter what you do in your own country, if your neighbor isn't putting in enough effect, or perhaps we are not seeing equal action from across the continent, well, you are still not going to record any successes at all. And so that's the reason why we have had these persons gather for this maiden edition. And it's also very noble to see that Nigeria is indeed taking the lead. And we know strategically, when you take a look at where Nigeria is positioned, talking about at the edge of the Gulf of Guinea and how important it is for trade, for commerce, and then also when you take a look at what has happened in terms of proliferation of weapons, there is a need for Nigeria to do something strategic. And so Nigeria is galvanizing everybody in Africa, hoping that we will be able to speak, first of all, talk to ourselves about the need to do something, and then also look around, talk to some of the other stakeholders, including the United Nations, including ECOWAS, including AU, and then, if possible, beyond the shores of Africa.
Absolutely, Ferdinand. Thank you for that update. Knowing that Africa accounts for 51% of global terrorism attacks is indeed a staggering number. Now, from the takeaways from General Musa's opening address, did you hear anything about what would happen after this maiden edition of the meeting, like you pointed out? Because we know what happens after is the most important thing.
Well, yes, and from what we know, well, let's first of all start by talking. But then there's a whole lot that has been talked about. Well, first of all, yesterday, ECOWAS did remind the UN that you were supposed to make a contribution of 75% to the ECOWAS standby force. Now, let's go back to the ECOWAS standby force. It is all about ECOWAS trying very hard to get a peacekeeping mission. Was something close to what we had before with ECOMOG, something close to what NATO has, a force that can actually cross borders, ensuring that no matter what it is, as far as it's terrorism, we have somebody or we have a force that we can call upon. Now, you look back at the United Nations, you look back at some of the commitments. Yes, there have been commitments, but how well have people obliged to these commitments? Now, that's one of the things that ECOWAS talked about. And then for General Musa, for him, he says it's just an opportunity to talk first. And then after talking, we can now begin to look at ourselves and then begin to talk about responsibilities. Press the rewind button. You also know how pivotal Nigeria has been in terms of ECOMOG, how we've put so much funds on the ground back then, and how right now we're looking at things and we are saying, well, maybe it's time for some other persons to also come in and let's have a more robust approach. So there is a whole lot that is being talked about, and I want to believe that this is not just going to be a talk shop. It's the maiden edition. We've seen several times people coming together, well, perhaps at the Sahel level, or maybe at the ECOWAS level, or maybe even at the UN level or the AU level, and they're talking about a need to do something. But I think what this just means is that, yes, it is time to take a much more serious approach. So without a doubt, I'm very, very sure that we expect something major to happen after now.
Thank you, Ferdinand. Now, considering JNIM's activities in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, and Boko Haram affecting Lake Chad countries, how significant is it that Burkina Faso and Mali did not send a representative, as reports are indicating? And also, how significant is it that Niger did?
Well, it's quite significant, and we all know the situation across the Sahel. We all know exactly the fact that some countries, have indeed come together and then have decided to take a different approach. Well, the good thing is that when you take a look at what's happening, well, just like we've talked about, it is something for everyone to be very concerned about. When you reference Burkina Faso, you talk about a country that had the most terrorism attacks and then even witnessed the most deaths as regards the Global Terrorism Index for 2024. And so there's a lot of reason for everybody to come together at this point. And we were indeed looking forward, haven't gotten commitments. By we, I mean the world globally, security stakeholders, we're looking forward. We haven't gotten those commitments from them that they definitely will attend and perhaps send some representatives so that we can all be a part of it. Now, for ECOWAS is doing something very interesting. Now, let's not forget that at a point, let's take you back to 2 years ago, when the military took over in some of these countries. Well, there were talks about them pulling out of ECOWAS and then ECOWAS sending them out and then using sanctions. But after a while, the discussion showed that, yes, that wouldn't be the right approach. There wasn't any need for any invasion, and then also there wasn't any need to even, allow them to be separated. And so for all these programs, well, they have had opportunities to attend. Now, the idea, according to the Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa himself, is to create an opportunity for them to also participate, like we've talked about. It is not just something that Nigeria can do alone. It's not something that Niger can do alone. It's not something that Mali can do alone. They have to be a collective effort. From the issues of the MNJTF, where we incorporate countries like Niger and then Chad, to a wider spectrum. We expect that everybody's going to come in and then at least contribute your own quota, no matter what it is, no matter the kind of system of government that you operate. Terrorism knows no bounds, and terrorists do not understand the system of government. All they do is come in, kill and destroy. And so I think there's going to be a whole lot that's going to be said about those countries, but from the ECOWAS stance, it is it's a window, it's an opportunity for them to come in, for them to participate, for them to know exactly what is expected of them in terms of the contributions to combating terrorism.
Absolutely. We'd like to thank you for that robust update. Our correspondent, Ferdinand Duroha from Abuja, many thanks for joining us.